Story time about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My husband actually cheated on his wife with me. I started working at his company when I was 18. We started an affair and I knew it was wrong, but at the time I was very broke. He offered me a wealthy lifestyle and believe it or not, we fell in love. So when he and I got married, I was still 18. He was much older than me. He was 42. Everyone in town, of course, started hating me because I broke up the family. His wife couldn't even see my face. My husband already had 2 kids when we got married. One was 12, one was 15. So they were much closer in age to me than he was. The kids and I got along super well. I was their cool stepmom and we had a lot of fun. When I turned 20, the oldest boy came to live with us. And I think you already know what happens. My husband was always traveling for work. That means my stepson and I would be home alone most of the time. One night we decided to watch a movie and before I knew it, we were making out on the couch. From then, we basically started an affair behind my husband's back. Part 2 is up. Part 2 about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said, my husband was always traveling for work. So my stepson and I would be alone in the house a lot. One night we were watching a movie and it just happened. After that, we couldn't get enough of each other. He even started skipping class so that he could spend more time with me. We basically turned into boyfriend and girlfriend when my husband wasn't there. When my husband would come home from his work trips, we would pretend like everything was normal. One day after my husband got back from one of his work trips, he found one of his son's socks in our bed. He asked me how it got there, but I told him it probably got stuck in there while I was washing the sheets. A few months passed by and my stepson and I are still hooking up. This is when I realized that I hadn't gotten my period in a few months. My period was always irregular, so I didn't think anything of it. My stepson went to the pharmacy to get me a pregnancy test. It came out positive. But the big problem is that my husband can't have children anymore. How was I going to explain this to my husband when he couldn't have kids? Part 3 is up. Part 3 about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My stepson and I take the pregnancy test and it turns out it was positive. Well, I told my stepson that his dad wasn't able to have kids anymore. That's when he really flipped out. Then he tells me we should just tell his dad the truth. I told him let's not do anything until we actually confirm that I'm pregnant. We go to the doctor the next day and it turns out I'm not pregnant. But this made me realize that we needed to end the affair. Once we got home, I told him we needed to break things off. He begged me not to and we went to his bedroom. Not even 2 minutes later, his mother walks in. She catches us on his bed. She nearly has a heart attack, calls his dad and tells him everything. She took him out of the house and told me never to see him again. When my husband came back from his trip, he made me promise not to see my stepson again. I told him we should get a divorce, but he said no. Then he confessed to me that he's been having an affair too. Now he doesn't even let me leave the house anymore. I want a divorce. What should I do? Part 4 about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. After my stepson and I got caught in his bedroom by his mother, aka my husband's ex-wife, they forbade us from talking to each other or even seeing each other. My stepson moved out of our house and I literally haven't spoken to him in about a week and a half. Here's the thing, my husband didn't really react the way I thought he would. He was definitely angry about me hooking up with his son, but he wasn't really angry about me having an affair. But the night that he found out, he told me he was also having an affair and that it was one of his employees. Basically the same way his relationship and mine started. If you haven't seen part 1, you should go see it. In part 1, I tell you that he cheated on his wife with me. In other words, my husband definitely has an MO. A few days later, my husband grabs my purse from me and cuts up all my credit cards. He even took my name off of our shared bank account. So even though I live in this beautiful mansion with lots of fancy cars, I don't have any money of my own. Then he told me that it was his ex-wife's idea to take all the money away from me. I guess she must think I'm a gold digger. I convinced my husband to give me an allowance. I still have to do my nails. But things get complicated again. My stepson DM me on Instagram. Part 5 is up. Story time about how I hooked up with my boyfriend's dad. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My boyfriend's dad is an absolute DILF. He used to be a competitive bodybuilder and even did some modeling back in the day. Well, let's just say my boyfriend didn't turn out with the same looks. Don't get me wrong, my boyfriend is really sweet, but he's not the best looking guy. One of the reasons we started dating and I really liked him was because of how considerate and loving he was. We started off as friends and he would take me out to dinner, wine and dine me, eventually asked me to be his girlfriend and I said yes. We both come from wealthy families, and our families loved the idea of us being together. Exactly a year ago, we moved in together, and he got a new job that required him to travel a lot. Well, he asked his dad to come check on me. So his dad would come over, we would watch movies, and just hang out. But one night we decided to do some drinking. I got super tipsy, and so did he. One thing led to another, and we ended up, And after that, we did it over and over. Of course, my boyfriend's dad felt super guilty, and so did I. He was cheating on his wife with me, and I was cheating on his son with him. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I hooked up with my boyfriend's dad. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. After my boyfriend's dad and I had hooked up a couple of times, of course, he felt really guilty, and so did I. We decided to end things cordially and never tell anyone about it. Fast forward to when my boyfriend comes home from his work trip. I had to pretend like nothing happened, but it was really hard because at this point I definitely caught feelings for my boyfriend's dad. I became really distant from my boyfriend and he started noticing. He also asked me one day if his dad came over to check up on me, which I said yes. After that, things were just not the same between my boyfriend and I. He would always ask me why I never touched him or kissed him, and I would just say that I felt bad or that I had my period. A month later, my boyfriend goes on another work trip. My boyfriend even invited me to come on the work trip, but I said no. Instead, as soon as he left, I called his dad and told him to come over. I told him I just wanted to talk, but really, his dad came over, we talked for about an hour, and then it happened again. It's like we just couldn't help ourselves. That's when he told me that he was catching feelings for me and that maybe even wanted to get a divorce. Part 3 of how I hooked up with my boyfriend's dad. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My boyfriend's dad tells me that he wants to get a divorce from his wife because he's catching feelings for me. He even suggested that we could move away to another town. And yes, at this point, I had totally fallen for him too. But at the same time, I still had a relationship with his son. But to be honest with you guys, I didn't have the guts to tell my boyfriend that I loved his dad. Since my boyfriend was still on the work trip, his dad would come over almost every single day. His wife, aka my mother-in-law, didn't even notice that she was coming over to my place. She thought he was at work and at the gym. We are now fully in love. My boyfriend came back from his work trip and of course, I was still distant. A few days later, he asked me what was wrong and I just don't know what to tell him. His dad told me to keep quiet for now because he wants to figure out what to do. I don't want to end a marriage and I know I don't want to break my boyfriend's heart. But at the same time, I am in love with his dad. I know you guys are going to think I'm a terrible person, but I genuinely need your advice. What do you guys think I should do? Should I be honest with my boyfriend? Story time about how my boyfriend broke up with me to marry my mother. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Yes, my boyfriend actually did marry my mom. A little backstory on him. He and I had been dating for 6 months. We decided we wanted to move in together, but neither of us had a job. So we ended up moving in with my mother. A little backstory on my mom. Her and I never got along when I was growing up. I mean, it would get to the point where we would throw hands. Every single week she had a new boyfriend. Most of the time her boyfriends would come live with us and she would pay for everything. She even asked me to get a job so that I could help support her and her boyfriend. I started working at a restaurant. And yeah, I helped her pay for bills. I would even buy her boyfriend his beer. When I got accepted into college, I decided I would move out. After that, I barely spoke to my mom. Fast forward to when my boyfriend and I move in with her. She would wear lingerie around the house and constantly flirt with my boyfriend. I had to tell her on several occasions to cover up and just leave him alone. But here's the thing, it never bothered my boyfriend. In fact, he would flirt back. I thought he was just joking. Until a few months passed and he breaks up with me. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my boyfriend broke up with me to marry my mother. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said in part 1, we moved into my mom's house and she was wearing lingerie all the time. And she would constantly flirt with my boyfriend. My boyfriend was having a really hard time finding a job, but luckily I found a job. So I started working as a personal assistant. The problem is that as a personal assistant, you have to be on call almost 24/7. So I was usually never home, and sometimes when I would get home, I'd have to go right back out. This allowed for my mom and my boyfriend to spend a lot of time together by themselves. I would come home and they would be watching movies on the couch together. My mom would always cook him dinner, and then I started finding out stuff. For example, I found out they went to the movies together and they didn't invite me. I only found out because my boyfriend used our joint bank account to pay for the tickets. Sometimes they would order food for themselves and not even offer me any. And they would have beach days. They were spending way too much time together. At first I thought this was good because it meant they got along, but the more my mom dressed provocatively, the more I realized she was trying to seduce him. Then my boyfriend breaks up with me and tells me that I should move out because him and my mom fell in love. Part